It's going down in my neighborhood, yeah, the neighborhood. Do you care if your neighbor good? Is your neighbor good?
Yes, yes. Education is elevation. I know it's been a long time, man. A lot has been going on in life, so give me the benefit of the doubt. Today, I got a nice, intentional conversation with y'all about Texas freedmen colonies. We're gonna discuss the word colony as well. We're gonna get into the intersections though of like dancing, art, as well as the undercommon safe communities that Black people built, maybe on socialism or not socialism. Maybe we'll discuss that as well. But today I got I'm gonna say an expert on the topic, that has put blood, sweat, and tears into discussing and researching this topic, as well as having some familiar ties, man. I'm gonna let Stacy introduce herself, and we can jump right into the conversation.
Hey, so hello. Thank you so much for having me on this platform. I'm so excited to get into this topic for us to talk about all of the over 500 places that Black people started their own towns in emancipation. So I'm Stacey Allen. I am the founder and artistic director of a dance company based in the Houston area called Nia's Daughters Movement Collective. And a lot of our work is rooted around education and teaching African American history through movement. And so I've had the pleasure of working with the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, which is the scholarship and the brainchild of Dr. Andrea Roberts, who really started us looking at all of these places in this particular way. So I'm excited to jump right into this conversation.
Yeah. What around what time period are we talking about when we say freedmen colonies?
Okay, so we're talking about 1865. So we know of Juneteenth happening 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation being signed. So we're talking about 1865 all the way through the 1930s, which is essentially from Reconstruction through the Great Depression.
Okay. And is there a uniqueness to Texas colonies or?
So the word freedom colonies really signifies this phenomena, right? Because what I have learned in my research, but also my lived experience as a native Texan, is that a lot of our people, a lot of Black people have deep ties to rural areas in Texas, right? And they even may have land ownership or previously had land ownership, or they may go back and visit family in rural areas. And there are some identifying factors that kind of tie all of these histories that we see mostly throughout East and Central Texas, right? Where Black people started their own towns. And so what a freedom colony is essentially a historically significant community. And this is all information you can find on the Texas Freedom Colonies Project website, which is a historically significant community where Black people post-emancipation were able to purchase land or were given land to start their own town. And so it's really about self-governance. Often these towns had a few key identifying factors. So they would often have a school, they would often have a church, they would often have a cemetery. And these are also some of the cultural markers that people are still able to use to identify some of these places. I can't stress enough the number over 500. As of now, I believe there are 557 sites that have been located. Some of these places are still very much active, but some of these places have ceased to exist in their original form, and that could be due to gentrification, but also environmental concerns and just displacement in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What when you and I met, what captured my attention was, I think, the word freedman with colony together. Me thinking about settler colonialism and thinking about like what symbolism is evoked for me when I think about a colony, but also thinking about how oxymoronic almost, you know what I'm saying, it is thinking about it in terms of like a colony with freedmen. But then I think from doing my own research, I see that In some instances, one can say it's like linguistic semantics, you know what I'm saying? And me trying to think about, you know, very, very intentionally about the word colony. And it's like, it could be a freedman town. It could be seen as a maroonage, you know what I'm saying? All these things are very similar, you know what I mean, when it comes to Black people being able to create our own towns, being able to create our own communities for safety and for community and for, you know what I mean? So I found that very, very interesting. And then what made it was that when I looked it up, meeting you at the table, I found out my hometown, Bryan, Texas, it was a freedman colony, a freedman town. And then, you know, now interested in doing more research about my own lineage and my own heritage to find out what specific ties that I have with, you know, the they call it Freedman Town, you know what I'm saying, in Bryan, Freedman Town, that side of town in Bryan, man. So I'm hoping that us doing this conversation and discussion will make other people want to go learn about, you know, these communities in their own state, because I'm pretty sure that I feel like they were all throughout the country.
And I think it's important to have that conversation about the word colony, the use of the word colony. I'm very curious what the intentional, I know that everything is done with intention, but what Dr. Roberts' intentional use of the word colony is versus town. But I would offer, based on what I know about a good amount of the freedom colonies in Texas, but this is not just a Texas phenomenon, just to be clear. This happened all over the South. And like you said, maroonage, that's all over the African diaspora. But I would offer for us to think expansively, because sometimes the word town invokes a certain level of, could you say, colonial? Colonial formality, right? Like, oh, we have a municipality, we have this certain type of governance that our state and federal may recognize. And I think there's importance to that, right? But I also think it is just as important to name a community that has strong ties and have decided to govern themselves. So whether or not they have an official charter agreement, or whether or not they have a mayor or a city council, they are still a historically significant community, which is language that the Texas Freedom Colonies Project uses. And so I think that I would propose that the word colony is really a way to actually do exactly what you're saying, to expand outside of our sometimes colonial or limited imagination of what self-governance can look like. Because it could be me, you, my mama and my cousin, my aunties, and we all have this plot of land, and now we're making decisions together intentionally, but we may not have even a post office, right? So I think that that's one of the things that we can think about. What does it look like to have self-governance in a multitude of different ways?
Yeah, definitely. And the specific thing of what you're saying right now is the reason why I thought this conversation was important. It's because a lot of people, especially our people, don't have sometimes not radical enough imaginations, and sometimes not enough understanding of history, where they're able to make a bunch of grandiose claims that says that Black people are not able to work together. Black people are not able to have our own things. Black people are not able to create our own communities because we always want to kill each other, and we always want to. So for me, thinking about these very real, materially, existing spaces that existed where Black folks worked together and Black folks had independence, and we use self-determination to create our own communities. To me, it explodes the possibilities of what we can create moving forward. But also it shows that a lot of people is lost in the sauce of white supremacy, and you have limited what Black folks can do based off what white people have told you. You have the limitations to do what cannot do, and I think that's the reason why this conversation is important. And shout out to Jenny Dorgan on Jenny Dorgan on Facebook has put us a nice little link, in the comment section, the TexasFreedomColoniesProject.com. Also, Absolutely. For people that's interested in getting any of the sources that's going to be referenced throughout this live stream, you can go follow me on Substack and get the key learning takeaways, as well as the website links, as well as a couple of book references, because education is elevation.
Yes, and I think that is really important. What I have found particularly fascinating about learning about freedom colonies is that a lot of these places are outside of urban enclaves, right? So I live in Houston.
What you mean by that? What you mean by that? Like urban
okay, so I live in
like...
Houston.
Yeah.
Okay, so I live in Houston, right? You live in Houston too.
Yeah.
So we often know about, those of us who are engaged in African American history, we often learn about Freeman's Town or even Independence Heights, or even in Northeast Harris County, we have Barrett Station, or I actually live in Fort Bend County. I'm from Mo City. We have Kendleton, right? Sometimes and in Dallas, the same thing, right? We think of the freedom colonies that are situated around urban environments. But what is fascinating, what I am actually mostly interested when I think about these places, are all the places that are in rural societies. It's like rural areas, I would say, rural areas. So that website that was just linked to Texas Freedom Colony, they have atlas, and on that atlas, there's like all these dots where freedom colonies are, and they've mapped them out. But most of them are outside of what we would consider major. I would consider the major metropolitan areas as Houston, Dallas, Austin, maybe San Antonio, right? Yes, there's freedom colonies in all those counties, but then also there's a lot in what we would consider rural areas of Texas. The reason why I bring that up, though, is because sometimes a lot of the dominant thought when we think of how Black people commune with one another is thought of out of what has been possible in urban environments or what we see as trends in urban environments. And so sometimes we have to take a step back and think about our history in a more extended way. So
Yeah.
even though some of this is propaganda, because crime in urban environments in some places have went down, right?
Sure.
But if we think about crime in the sense of like, oh, if you live in the inner city, then Black people are killing each other. We already know how that is propaganda. But even if we went with that as a talking point, those aren't all. That's not our full history in this country. That's not our full story. And so sometimes you got to go beyond what is the urban enclave of a situation and think more expansively. And then you will see that our people still have very strong familial ties and still have strong institutional ties, whether it's through civic organizations, through churches. And Black people do, in fact, and continue to have worked together to build possibilities for their families and their children.
Okay. Like my daughter came in real fast. Had to, I feel like the kids just sleeping all trying to sleep all night and or stay up all night, sleep all day. It's like, no, get up, do some things. But I definitely, as somebody that's born and raised in Bryan, Texas, I'll say I'm definitely one of those people that grew up with one of those small town chips on the shoulder, especially somebody that got to when I started getting in high school, being able to move around and seeing that when you was from Dallas or you was from Houston or you was from San Antonio and even Austin, when you was from like some of the bigger staple cities, that it usually came a narrative, a little bit of history, maybe a little bit of cultural respect. And when you came from cities like Bryan and little smaller towns, I feel like it was always some disrespect or some marginalization that we had experienced. So as somebody now with a platform, I love trying to use my platform to put on for small towns, especially for rural Texas, because I feel like we get skipped around a lot. You know what I'm saying? Especially understanding that a lot of Black people a lot of Black folks in these urban enclaves have a whole bunch of familiar ties to rural towns, but because it ain't cool, you see what I'm saying? The only time they start talking about being from the country or this, when they're talking about a family reunion, or they want to prove they got a little countryside, they know a bit about riding horses or a little bit about trail rides, then they bring it up. So for me, it's also thinking about too is that in the status quo, there are a lot of hardships and obstacles that Black folks have to endure to be able to build things in these rural areas. But understanding there's a history of these colonies or these towns, you feel me? I'm gonna say colony. I think that to the people in the audience, so I'm saying, especially in the comment section, let me know what y'all thinking in terms of Freedman Colony, Freedman Town, given both what me and Stacey have been able to account for and thinking about having this expansive history and thinking about how when you say a town, there's something that is much more structural and rigid that comes with municipalities and comes with mayors and comes with structure. And when you say colony, it automatically for me evokes colonization, colonizer. This is on this type of land, but in terms of indigenous erasure, and I feel like being a debater, you know what I'm saying, finding the permutation, the middle ground in this is that this tension in our language is accounting for there's always an identity in people that we taking place on, that we building on, that we trying to make liberation on, find freedom and find safety on. There was people here that was before, you know what I'm saying? And I think sometimes we forget that, you know, indigeneity, settler colonialism, colonial violence, the genocide of Native American people took place and it's taking place, you know. And then the last thing I say about this terminology is that when I started doing my little research and understanding, one of the reasons why the indigenous erasure is unique here in our state, Stacey, is because when we became a American state, a lot of the treaties that Native Americans had worked out was with the Mexican government, with the Mexican army.
Right.
So when Texas became an independent, governor, independent country, because, you know, Texas was its own country for people, for many people that's watching that don't know. That's the reason why Texas like to fly its flag, you know, at the same height as the federal, you know what I'm saying, as the national flag, because we was its own country, for better or for worse. But I'm bringing this up because
absolutely for worse, because Texas became its own state and primarily to keep our ancestors enslaved, and that's just the truth of it. And so some of the pride around leaving the Mexican government, becoming its own independent state, and then joining the Union is surrounded around indigenous erasure and
preserving slavery.
Preserving slavery, which I gotta say real quick, special shout out to all the people that's working with the State Board of Education and trying their best in these turbulent times to keep some of this history, the little that was there, keep some of that history alive and well, or propose new courses and new amendments, because what we see right now in 2026 is an intentional re-erasure. As we start to have these conversations about freedom colonies, as people are education is elevation, right? Like what this platform is, as we start to learn more, you start to do different things. And so we see that is this intentional effort to erase so that we don't remember why Texas wanted to be its own place in the first place. So I just want to put that out there.
I just had a interview with Gina Hinjosa. That's how I say her last name, Gina. And we were talking specifically about Texas education and about how there are no Black people in the curriculum, 7th grade Texas history. But it's weird that Texas wants to highlight Juneteenth as being Texas history uniquely, with no mention of slavery within Texas history at all. We don't talk about Stephen F. Austin being a colonizer or being a slave master. We don't talk about Davy Crockett being a slave master. We don't talk about none of the conflict they have about, you know what I'm saying, servitude versus slavery. We don't talk about none of that. But then we talk about Galveston being like, you know, the home of Juneteenth, to talk about Texas being the first place that the Union came. And it's like there is it's some missing context there. You know what I mean? And what I found is that in talking with Gina and giving her the benefit of the doubt is that because the boogeyman Trump has come into office, there is a lot of mystifying of how, excuse my French, fucked up Texas history has been before Donald Trump got in office. I was in 7th grade in 2002. You see what I'm saying? 2000 and you feel me? 3. You know what I mean? Like I'm talking about early 2000s. I was in middle school. So for us to think about Texas education being something that's uniquely Greg Abbott or being uniquely Donald Trump, to me, it's like not being intellectually honest, but it's also not showing that Texas has a structural issue when it comes to acknowledging indigeneity and Blackness in the curriculum. You feel me? And it predates Greg. It predates Trump. Going all the way back to, I feel like probably even before the Daughters of Confederacy, probably going back before then. We've always had an issue with Texas history and talking history in Texas, period.
I think some of these things are connected, right? So one of the things I think about is like the public memory and the internet discourse surrounding is Texas even the South, right? There's always this conversation of like, is Texas the South? And I would say absolutely yes. Like it was slave territory, absolutely the South. They conceded with the Confederacy. It's absolutely the South. I don't see why it wouldn't be, but I think because of that complicated Texas history, sometimes it's seen as separate from what this whole eastern portion of Texas is doing the exact same thing that Louisiana, Mississippi, and all that is doing. So there's that public memory, right? And you're absolutely correct that this is not a new problem. But I think what is interesting in this particular timescape is that as people become more aware of some of these origins, there's like a doubling down on the erasure of them. I think it's very critical, even to talk about also like these gaps, right? So you talked about the erasure of all of these Black people, all of these indigenous people, but then all of a sudden Juneteenth is here. So it's almost like a holiday celebrating freedom, but a freedom from what and from whom. That's also very similar to why I think the work of learning about all of these places where Black people started towns is so important, because often we go from emancipation in most curriculum, not just in Texas, but just in public memory. Because when I'm speaking about public memory, I'm talking about what people think of as Black history outside of just what you learn in the classroom. We go from the Civil War, emancipation, and then we go straight to the Civil Rights Movement in people's public memory, right? And so it's like, what are all the things that happened and our story? What are our stories in between that? And so this is evidence that Black people were up to something great and beautiful and wonderful during Reconstruction. And these are the things that were possible during a Reconstruction era. And the fact that these people have not been able to retain their land due to structural policies that force their removal, whether they just, because some people just plain out stole stuff. Some people burn down the gym. Right, yes. So there's a bunch of different reasons why Black people haven't retained their land. And so then it's like, if you remove that history of all of this growth and ownership, and then we just drop right back into 2026 and we act like, oh, these people are disenfranchised, but we have no idea why, then there's no case for reparations in public memory. So that's why I think that some of these things are intentionally taken out, because if you can understand how post-emancipation, there was over 500 places where Black people owned their own land and started their own towns, and then we think about what we're dealing with now with redistricting and the intentional loss of Black political power, then that's a fuller conversation about what is possible and what has been intentionally made impossible to carry on.
Hell yeah.
And so that's why history and curriculum in a school setting, but also at the house, also at the church, also in the community center, all in these third spaces, is so critical. Because when you understand this continuum, like you said, the context, a lot of the context is missing, but you understand this continuum, you can understand better the story. And so that's why I have become an evangelist about telling people about these places where Black people started their own colonies, towns, spaces where they had government. Yeah.
Let's get into specifics real fast. Let's get into specifics. So can you name some of the places where these freedmen colonies, freedmen communities, I'm gonna say freedmen community, where these freedmen communities were, and what like can you name this throw some out so the audience, you know what I'm saying, people that's watching and can maybe have a few of them to go Google and look up themselves, but then like highlight like one or two that really jump out to you, maybe the one that your family had tied to, you know what I'm saying, and some of the ones that you know, but like rural, like not like Independence in Houston, but like, you know what I mean, small town type stuff.
Okay, so I think it's important for people to start off where they live, right? So I don't know who in the chat, and I can't see the chat, but if y'all start naming, I'm not the encyclopedia, but name some of the counties y'all live in and that y'all tuning in from. I'm curious to know. But there's free colonies in Harris County and Fort Bend County and Brazoria County. There's freedom colonies in Bastrop County, in Travis County. There's freedom colonies in Newton County. So one of the better known freedom colonies is Shankleville. You guys might have seen the recent they re-aired the recent special from Michael Strahan talking about the freedom colony that his people originated from, and that's Shankleville. And so I want to talk about Shankleville a little bit. So the story of Shankleville, this is one of the ones I'm gonna highlight. So the story of Shankleville is Jim and Winnie were enslaved on a plantation in Mississippi. The wife, Winnie, was sold to a plantation in Newton County, Texas. And so Jim decided he didn't want to live without his wife. And so he escaped that plantation and traveled from Mississippi to Texas. So what we know, Africatown, Alabama, absolutely, yeah. What we know about the distance between Mississippi and Texas, that you got to cross the Mississippi River. You got to forage through the swamps. Like you got to forage through the forest, right? That's not an easy trek. But he reunited with his wife by spring on that plantation, and essentially him and the wife talked to their master, and the master in Texas bought him from the master in Mississippi. Many years later, that emancipation came and they were freed, and by this time they had grown children, and one of their children was married to Stephen McBride, which is my husband's ancestor. And they started the town Shankleville. And so this is the freedom colony that I first learned about freedom colonies from, because I learned it at a family gathering, and I decided to make a show about it. And so the show that we tour with my dance company, Nia's Daughters Movement Collective, is called The Fairy Tale Project. And the Fairy Tale Project is basically a love story inspired by this story. It's historical fiction. So if you've come to the show, it's, it's fiction. But that's one freedom colony. That's probably the freedom colony that gets the most recognition. In Bastrop, they have a lot of they have several different freedom colonies. Alvin Ailey is from the Navasota, Rogers, Texas, East Texas area, Bell County. So he also has freedom colony roots. So I would like to think that Revelations, which is probably one of the most well-known African-American dance pieces in the world, is inspired by his time in the freedom, growing up, seeing churches and freedom colonies. What else? Oh, my good friend Victor Lee Givens, he's a cultural steward, and his family has a freedom colony in Houston County near Crockett, Texas. So Givens Hill, and there's several other freedom colonies. They also have, there's still sites on Rosenwald schools, and just other sites that are still physically present. Also, the Mary Allen College is in Crockett. So, you have these deep East Texas roots. I could go on and on, but what I would encourage people to do is to go on that atlas. When you go on that atlas, you can click on them dots, and it'll show you like so much oral history that's been collected over the years.
And that's the atlas that's on this website right here, on this Texas Freedom Colonies Project. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it's an atlas on that. And then my family. So serendipitously, I would say I was doing different conference talks about the Fairy Tale Project, the show that I was just talking about, and I found out that my family also is from a freedom colony. So my family is from Panola County, which is more like north East Texas, near like Marshall, where Wiley College and all that is. Even though Marshall is in Harrison County. As y'all can see, I know a lot of the jurisdictions from learning this stuff. But in Panola County, my family's from 1100, and it's essentially 11 families that got 100 acres, and they started a community. And we still call it 1100. And some of my family still owns their property there. So it's so much to learn.
Yeah, I told
so
y'all.
So many Black people from. Oh. Go ahead.
No, you good. Now listen. You what about to say? I didn't cut you off. That's an important statement about to say.
I was about to say so many Black people from Houston, really from East Texas and Louisiana. It's crazy that so many of us have roots from that area. But I mean, obviously so when we think about what the migration patterns were and what some of our stories are.
Yeah, man. I found this little piece that is on Texas State Historical Association .org. You feel me? It says that freedmen settlements, otherwise known as black settlements, freedmen colonies, or freedmen towns, are historically significant communities that was founded across the South, including Texas, from 1865 to 1930. Black Texans obtained land upon these settlements were founded via cash purchase or adverse possession, often in flood-prone bottomlands at the edges of plantations and city boundaries. Something else that I had found. This is coming from Oakhurst Library, Texas A&M University. But it says that following the Civil War, the promise of 40 acres and a mule never materialized. Instead, state laws and discriminatory practices systematically barred black people from land ownership. For example, the Texas Black Codes in the 1866 Homestead Act specifically excluded African Americans from accessing public land. Free people were often relegated to the most undesirable, unincorporated lands that was flood-prone bottomlands, swamps, and areas along county lines that white settlers didn't want. So for me, thinking about these areas, is also thinking about how black people, we've always been able to make lemonade, lemon meringue, lemon pie, lemon, you know what I'm saying, everything out of lemons, or making
I was just about to say that, make a way out of no way.
Well, a way out of no way. You feel me? You gave us a dime, we made a penny, we made you know what I'm saying, $1, $5, $20, we made something out of nothing. So I think that understanding these communities, especially putting them in cultural context. So we know when you watch Sinners, we know when you watch the Beloved movie, we know when you watch Color Purple, we know when you watch there are a lot of different movies that doesn't necessarily name it specifically, but it references it, it points at it, you know what I'm saying?
Talking about this, right?
Yeah, give us some more. I know when me and you had a conversation, we talked about Sinners. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to give people a nice description. You feel me? And make it where your imagination can. Yeah.
Yeah, so Zora Neale Hurston is from a freedom colony. So if you're a student of her work and you hear her talking about Edenville, that's a freedom colony, but also some of her work is set in that environment. So I dare say a lot of Black creative genius is coming from these places, these safe spaces where Black people were able to just be. And in a country that has not been kind to us, is the truth of the matter. They've been able to carve out these spaces where they had autonomy and were able to create a life of their own. So Zora Neale Hurston is a cultural example. I talked about Ailey having Texas Freedom Colony's roots. I believe DJ Screw is from Bastrop County, and if he's from Bastrop County, more than likely he has Freedom Colony roots.
He definitely is.
He more than likely has Freedom Colony roots. Yeah. Okay. So, like, just to kind of put that into perspective, what we're able to do. But I want us to also think about, okay, so these are the things historically, like what freedom colonies are, but how does this impact what is possible for our future? How do we use this legacy of what our ancestors built to impact what we're doing today and how we can make a better future for ourselves? So for some of us, like you talked about that small town chip on your shoulder, I vaguely remember meeting people in college who were from smaller towns, and it would always be like this discourse. It's so interesting now that with some of the things that are happening in popular culture, that country roots are more popular. But how can we take advantage of that? Like, how can we take advantage of people wanting to wear cowboy hats? Like, all of that may be an aesthetic, but how do we get people to dig in deeper? How do we get them to actually check on land that they may still own?
Let me get a little philosophical. Let me get a little little academic, man. A little academic real fast, man. So Dr. George Yancey is a whiteness scholar that writes about whiteness studies. When I was in college and I was a college policy debater, whiteness studies was some of the first literature base, or what was the first literature base that I used to intellectually beat down a lot of folks. One of the arguments that they made that George Yancey wrote about is flipping the gaze, Gaze. You know what I'm saying? And what it says is that, you know, the white gaze, the white perception, the way that white people view norms, values, standards, procedures, operations. All of these things are typically done so we can justify our humanity under this spectrum, under this gaze. For me, the mere presence, the existence, the history of these black towns, these black communities, these freedmen, whatever you want to call it, to me, it proves that black people are able to build in a way that does not center the white gaze. I.e., when we think about these different communities, they're not trying to formulate themselves and position themselves in a way that says, what is the way that us as black people can run ourselves to make white people really respect us and show each other and we can, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't ran that way. It was ran in a very, it was structured in a very autonomous way.
Consciously, are you saying they didn't live in a master plan community?
They live in a what?
Are you saying that they taught their children? Are you saying that they didn't live or value living in a master plan community? Are you saying
nah,
is that what the white gaze interrupts? Are you saying that they didn't pride themselves in their children being the only black child in the school? Like,
not at all.
I just want to say, like, yes.
Say that, yo, but this to me, this is a part of the conversation though. Like to me, like when we want to go past aesthetics, go past trail ride dancing and line dancing, go past talking about how everybody got ties to Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia, all this. Let's really think about what can be learned from a value methodology standpoint from these communities. And to me, it shows that there's a way for us to organize that doesn't necessarily say that the way that we're viewed by white people should dictate how we organize. When people talk about Black Wall Street, they talk about Tulsa. That also is a freedman community. You see what I'm saying? And in this instance, it's like, hey, what can we build when we are not limited to thinking about how can we prove ourselves to white people? Politically, socially, economically, how can we organize ourselves in ways that does not say that the only way we can do it is based off the standards that white folks have given us? When I look at the history of these safe havens, you know what I'm saying? It's like, nah, they were literally built in a way to obscure racial terror. They were built in a way to get around black pathology that says that black people are backwards, lazy, and can never do anything for ourselves. And to me, I think that's when we start digging, you know? And shout out to you, who's that? Arthur Fletcher. I appreciate you that for that twin. You got it.
I think it's so important though, because I think sometimes we lose our way thinking about the white gaze. And I understand how prevalent these mindsets can be because we're having to not live in freedom colonies for the most part. But you're absolutely right and spot on where you're saying like, okay, so some of us may be able to physically move back. Okay. Some of us may or may not have land. Some of our families, freedom colonies may or may not still exist in a material way that welcomes us back. But what can we bring from the mindset of people who use collective action, who use cooperative economics to build things together, and how did they look out for each other? And that kind of brings us into that thread you were talking about in terms of like socialism. Like, is this socialism or is this just taking care of each other?
Both. It's both. It's both.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's both. To me, it's like capitalism is defined by private ownership. You know, so once you have a community-owned, a community-owned organizing or a community-owned community, that's socialism, and you know what I'm saying, intact. When I learned about Black Wall Street and learned that after, you know what I'm saying, the massacre happened, they were able to rebuild, and they were able to rebuild based off of the other black towns that came and helped them. I think about communal organizing and also all of the tenets I've learned about socialism. So for me, it's like if we didn't have a private entity that could profit off of the labor and extract the labor from this community, we start talking about socialism, and we start getting into, you know, how bartering happens, how resources are shared, how communities are taken care of, and how they're looked after. Now we start getting into different values. You see what I'm saying? The idea of being a go get it, I got it for myself, so everybody got to get it for themselves. That is a very capitalistic individual understanding. To me, the very structure of a freedman community, a freedman colony, a freedman town is social in a way that it's already thinking about how, as a collective, can we create a space of refuge for safety as a collective. Once you start thinking about a collective, we're already getting into socialism. We're already getting into socialistic values, you feel me, and socialistic, you know what I'm saying, methodologies. And that's the reason, because think about it like this. In capitalism, we're taught to think about us and ours and our family. So looking after ourselves and each other is anti-capital. That's what I will argue and debate. And I think that I got some couple debate plaques behind me that I'll be willing to, you know what I'm saying? What'd you say?
I want to say this too. So we're talking kind of on a, I want to say this too. We're talking on like a philosophical plane of like what does it mean to be anti-capitalist, and how do we take this freedom colony methodology into our current lives. But in a very material, us thinking of property ownership as individual is to our detriment, because a large significance of Black land ownership is disseminated through heirs property. So when a person passes away, and of course these are more complicated situations, but we talk about Black land retention. If we could, in a very material way, if we could get our land out of heirs property and into trust, whereas communal ownership is less likely to no longer be owned by us. And I mean, I understand that everybody may have different goals and objectives, but that's kind of like the whole point of what you just said, the individualism of it, right? And so you get 2 to 3 generations down in that heirs property, and it's you splitting up acres, and then the developer comes in, and that's how some of us have lost our land. And I want to be very clear, I'm not saying that to say it's our fault that this is happening, but I'm just saying even in a system that allegedly rewards capitalism is false, because it does not reward capitalism. Because when people walk into these environments with that individual mindset, they're more likely to be taken advantage of if they're a collective force. So I wanted to make that point, because as we talk about these things philosophically, these things are harming us individually as well in a material way. And that's how some of us have been taken advantage of for decades.
Oh yeah. I think that the discussion of the heirs property and how a lot of the legal methods that different real estate developers use to steal Black land, to me, it's the way they're able to extract that value using these capitalistic tools to take away X, Y, and Z. But I think that in us thinking about how I think 80% of Black land was lost from the Reconstruction, and now I think over 80%, over 80% of Black ownership of land that we see from the Reconstruction era to now has been, you know what I'm saying, taken away through deeds and heirs and just straight up theft through urban development, urban renewal. We just put some medicine in it. I'm almost. I'll be done in like 20 minutes, and then I put some medicine in it, but I can't put. I get you some Tylenol. My daughter's like, my ear hurts. When she went swimming, she got the swimmer's ear, you know. So hey, we on daddy duties now, making sure we get this ear infection cured and scured. You know what I'm saying? I forgot what I was about to say.
But absolutely, you're absolutely correct. Like when we think about what Black land loss looks like, and that's also a part of the wealth. But then also like the I know we talked about how you know more Oklahoma, and that's something I still need to learn more about. But what I do know is that then Black people was minding their own business, and racial terror, Jim Crow, racism came to destroy their communities. And so sometimes it isn't just a matter of, oh, you got to do all the things right. Sometimes we are victimized by the level of structural violence that occurs. And so I'm curious, like, how can we, using this history, again, I ask, how can we use this history, make sure that we are telling the history correctly and we are guarding ourselves and shielding ourselves as much as humanly possible for what we're about to go through in the future.
I think organizations like yours is giving us great models
You have
of how we can do it.
do people
Yeah, but I think organizations like you, I feel like we got a little delay on the internet, man. Shout out to us.
Yeah, so I think that can really say like those that I couldn't hear you. What you say?
I about to say we got a little delay. We got a little delay on the internet. That's the reason why.
What did you say? I couldn't hear you.
It's a can you hear me now? I think it's a little delay. It's a little delay. That's the reason why we was double dutching for a minute. Can you hear me now? Is it going through now? Is it going through now? Is it hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's coming through now. Right. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. I can.
Yeah, what were you saying now?
Oh, yeah, but you were saying like, yeah, I was gonna say, like that's why I think I was gonna say like that's the role that I think artists play in this, because we have an opportunity to illuminate some of these histories in third spaces, where maybe we're not learning this in a formal school environment, but we have the opportunity to share this history. But I think our duty now is to go beyond just awareness and get into some shifts, action. Whether those policy shifts, legislative shifts, action. And those are the things that I want us to be encouraged to do. The absolute biggest compliment from somebody who comes to my show, somebody told me this just last week, 2 weeks ago. They came to the show, they saw the things, but then they went and checked on their family land. They went and tried to figure out with the tax assessor's office what was going on, trying to figure out, like just starting to take some of the steps, starting to look at, I know it's a growing movement of people involved in urban farming and getting people back to the land and growing food. I think that's critical. Just all these different ways that we can be a light to our community and bring that energy from self-reliance and having autonomy, but also working cooperatively together into the future.
Yeah. And I think being able to help organizations like yours, being able to highlight organizations like yours is how we preserve this history, how we preserve this work. I think that us on the internet, particularly myself and people like myself on the internet, sometimes can create a false distinction between what's happening in virtual reality and what's happening in material reality, and have to make sure that that the relationship between what we're talking about and what we're doing on social media mirrors what's happening and what's going on in real life, and making sure we make these connections. That's the reason why I wanted to do this episode with you specifically, and making sure that we are intentional about highlighting Black people being able to have self-determination, being able to politically, socially, economically think, independently, being able to have a history that disproves all of the Black pathology, that says that Black people cannot work together, that we all want to kill each other, and that we only want to fight, that we have no way of being in camaraderie, we have no way in being in community. The mere existence and history of these colonies, these towns, these freedmanships, you feel me, are able to really illustrate that a lot of us have internalized Black inferiority, and a lot of us have allowed for white supremacy to do a lot of the work for us. Well, we no longer have to even try to work together. We allow for narratives that's been constructed by white supremacy to say that we cannot work together because X, Y, and Z. And usually what I know as a historian, somebody that loves history, somebody that loves information, is that just because you don't know, don't mean it don't exist. Just because you're ignorant to it, don't mean that it's not, a phenomenon. And I think that sometimes we tend to be lost in the sauce of me search, and we believe just because we haven't done research on a phenomenon that it don't exist. If it don't matter to me, then it don't matter to thee at all. It's like, nah, man, it's because you ain't experienced something on me that ain't happening. It's because you don't know something on me it didn't happen. And I think that is one of the purposes of having these live stream episodes, and trying to bring as many people on as possible to talk about the things that's going on in this world, man. And starting to bring it to a closure. What is the method to the madness, or one of your motives behind putting together dance in these live shows you do, and the history of freedmen colonies? Like, what is the method to the madness? What is your motive?
You broke up a little bit. What's the
what is like the what is your inspiration between putting together dance in the history of these
Okay,
communities?
so I think the question is, what is the inspiration that got me started in bringing this Freedom Colony work into the live shows? Is that the question?
Yep.
Okay, so I was genuinely okay. So a couple of things. I started my dance company after becoming a mother because I wanted to be able to create in a space where Black mothers could bring um, could still be on schedule competition. So that's one. Then two, I was very interested in creating a show that wasn't just the Black version of a thing, which is no shade to people that do think that's important as well. But I wanted to tell a original Black story. So like, oh, this is a fairy tale, which is why we call it a fairy tale, like a Black love story that's the original story versus like now the Cinderella is a Black girl, Prince is a Black dude. Okay, number two. And so shout out to my husband, Chase Allen, and his family for opening up this brand new love story that I didn't even know about. So the original inspiration was just learning of this story in my real life and then understanding how that legacy of Jim and Winnie Shankel connected to multiple things. It just opened up more research. And so when we created the show in 2022 and we premiered it in Houston at Discovery Green. A lot of people who are descendants of Jim and Winnie Shankel came to the premiere, and it was just a beautiful experience to see their family history. And I mean, and it's my children's family history too. Like my children are descendants on stage. So there we decided to then tour, take shows specifically small towns. And from there, I started learning more stories. And so then we have a piece that one of our dancers choreographed about the Mary Allen College. Really, it was kind of like a assemblage of learning these Black stories and learning about these freedom colonies that we were able to make more work about different colonies. And then it turned into, we were able to have a residency with Freemanstown in Houston. And so we created work around that. And then now we have a piece choreographed by Shawnee Joff, which is about the connection between Gory Island, where the slave dungeons are, and the slave in Galveston, right? That connection from Gory to Galveston. So what truly happened is started from the inspiration of wanting to create really multi-generational family experiences where you tell Black stories. And then we started traveling more. I was able to travel with the company. I was able to study in Senegal, and I learned about Gory Island. And then from all those different places, more inspiration drew to create more dance work around this topic.
Man, and when is the next show?
So our next show is actually in October. It's October 23rd and 24th, and it is called First Class Citizen. And it is about the political organizing of women such as Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and some of our hometown Texas heroes as well. So that'll be October 23rd and 24th in Houston. Strategically placed during early voting. So y'all go to the polls and then come to our show in the nighttime.
Yeah, man. Well, in the last things, what are ways that the audience can or people can help? People can learn more about your organization, learn more about attending these shows, learn more about the history. You got any books you want to drop? Any references? I know you've mentioned your mentor a couple of times. You can make that mention one more time. But for anybody that wants to learn, maybe you've planted a seed and they want to water that. You know what I'm saying? That seed that you planted about this topic. You got anything for us?
Yes. So first, I want to tell you, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for creating a platform. Thank you so much for your interest. The freest thing you can do is if you conversation, share with somebody, right, and help them. Also, I want to encourage y'all to so this conversation is a starting place, but then I encourage you guys to read more. So one of the things I encourage y'all to do is to go to the Texas Freedom Colonies Project. Website that is more about this week. Okay, is it okay? It was like it had stopped. Okay, some other things that I think that you guys should read. There's a book by Beatriz Nascimento, and she talks about maroonage in Brazil. There's books about people who are from freedom colonies. One is called Echoes of the River, which is by some of the people who are from Barrett Station. I want to encourage you all to even get my children's books. I wrote 2 children's books about dance. The first one is A Little Optimism Goes a Long Way. The second one is D is for Dancing Through the Diaspora, issue of different dance forms. I would encourage you guys to read work by Catherine Dunham, Zora Neale Hurston, both anthropologists who studied extensively throughout the diaspora. I encourage you guys to follow me on social media. My Instagram is at The Black Artsy Mom. I'm also on Substack with the same name, The Black Artsy Mom. I've written 2 Substacks. I encourage you all to get involved in educational equity politics, whether it's your local school board or state board of education. I got so much. I guess I'm saying a lot. Go to the website, our website, www.niasdarts.com, to stay connected to we have the morning when you want somebody word life and person to person is. So yeah.
Yes, man. Well, I thank you. Appreciate you for pulling up. There will be a article / essay that comes out after this that will detail a lot of things that we discussed, as well as some key takeaways and some, a nice little kind of like bibliography, almost. But yeah, man. Right now, y'all know that here in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott has made it where Black history and Christian history are now in opposition to each other. He wants to take Black history out of the curriculum and add more about the Israeli-Hamas conflict. It's kind of what he referred to, what they refer to it as well as getting more into like Bible history, Bible education. The reason why, education's elevation is a thing, to be able to preserve all of the history and all the education that they're trying to erase. Shout out to all of my adult learners out there that is dedicated to, being life learners, man. I told y'all I would have the intro and outro. I've been moving. That's the reason why, it's been hard for me to be consistent, but consistency is on the way. Ain't nothing to it but to do it. Here is the part of the song that is the outro right now. Y'all let me know in the comment section, especially on Substack, if y'all would like to see different parts of the song be the intro and the outro. I chose some random parts. This is what I chose for the outro.
We told them white people hear us, but they weren't listening. Dropping gems with some depth, trying to dig in. Elevating to another level, you should get in. I got my tie on with my cardigan.